Nigeria has a high number of people in pre-trial detention, which contributes to overcrowding in its custodial facilities. Prison congestion is a challenge faced by many countries globally, and Nigerian Correctional Service is known to be grappling with the congestion of inmates in its facilities around the country. At a high-level conference on the Congestion and Corrections Administration organized by the Federal Ministry of Interior and supported by the Nigeria Correctional Service (PRAWA), Open Society Initiative for West Africa (OSIWA) and the United Nations Children's Fund (UNICEF), decisions were reached by participants on how to decongest Nigerian correctional facilities. Arise News Defense and Security Correspondent Ferdinand Duroha reports.
Getting the correctional sector to work effectively for the betterment of the nation's justice system is the focus at this gathering, organized by the Ministry of Interior. The conversation is necessitated by the current population of inmates at correctional facilities across the nation, a situation compounded by the high number of inmates awaiting trial. An officer of the Nigeria Correctional Service gives a breakdown of the number of persons held in correctional facilities as at Tuesday, 9th May 2023.
What we have as at yesterday was 75,436 inmates nationwide. Out of this, you can imagine about 52,446 all are awaiting trial persons. And out of this, still more than 70% are awaiting trial who has overstayed. Some has overstayed like over 2,000 has overstayed more than 10 years in custody without getting their trial.
Executive Director, Prison Rehabilitation and Welfare Action, laments the abuse of power by various security agencies detaining people indiscriminately.
But I also want you to also note that we have problems not just in the Nigerian Correctional Service. There are today about 18 other institutions that can detain people. Some of them are in this room here. For the question therefore, just like the Correctional Service can come in and tell you their statistics, can we say that of the others? Is there any one person in this country, Nigeria, who can tell us now, anybody, including the president, including the minister, can tell us how many persons are in detention in Nigeria? Do you know that nobody knows?
Another reason highlighted for prison congestion is juvenile detention.
From our field missions to correctional centers, we have, like you had today, more than 80% of children in detention are there on pre-trial status. That is to say, they have not concluded their case, they are just there for reason of mere allegations that they have done something. And some of them are there for non-violent offenses like stealing, attempted stealing, and all that. So for us, this is an opportune moment, very strategic for Nigeria, to look at the issue of children deprived of their liberty, because the best place for children to be is home.
It is noteworthy that the current state of affairs persists despite a series of reforms to transform the correctional service from a punitive to a rehabilitation center. These reforms include the 2019 Nigeria Correctional Service Act that changed the Nigeria prisons to the Nigeria Correctional Service. Recommendations from the conference will be passed to policymakers for consideration. Ferdinand Duroha, Arise News.
Joining us now from our Abuja studio is Ogechi Ogu, a lawyer and Deputy Director of Prisoners Rehabilitation and Welfare Action, PRAWA. Good morning and welcome to the morning show.
Good morning and thank you for having me.
Well, thank you for joining us. Well, from the intro by Ayo, it's pretty much clear that the problem of overpopulation of Nigerian prisons is something that we need to deal with. By the conference that you had in Abuja, if you could share with us a statement of the problem and some of the resolutions, some of the recommendations made at the end of that meeting to guide government in different directions.
Okay, thank you so much, and I wish to appreciate Arise TV for this opportunity because it's coming quite a good time. There's new government in place, and every constituency is trying to ensure that their issues are factored in. So this is a huge opportunity for the justice sector and especially the correctional service to bring forth the issues that need be attended to. And I keep imagining what the states are doing, the federal government, in terms of their manifesto, what they have in place for the justice sector. Now, the conference, as you have asked, targeted at the congestion of correctional centers. As you can see from the report given by Ferdinand, is a clear news, it's no news now, nothing new in terms of statistics regarding the issues around congestion in correctional centers. And it is important that we equally point out the fact that over 4 decades now, several years now, that many initiatives have been put in place to address these challenges. We have policies made, we have laws made, initiatives, legislative interventions. So many things have been done in this respect. And as we speak, often you see the initiatives hitting the issues, addressing it, but momentarily that will come and go again, and we'll get back to where we were in terms of correctional centers, congestion. So I think the conference that was held was targeted at getting all the stakeholders involved. Stakeholders in the justice sector were all represented at that conference. And it was a discussion around how do we get around this problem and have a sustainable solution. And one clear thing that is obvious is that before you talk about congestion, there is always inflow. Now, the inflow is the major issue. And we have, from the conference, it is clear, so many points that were raised include the fact that, apart from the fact that innovations have been brought by way of laws, you still see that by practice, these things are still going on. So most of the recommendations are targeted at getting the different stakeholders, different agencies of the criminal justice system to do their part, perform their own responsibilities, because the agency of the criminal justice system is like a chain. And once any of the chains breaks, you find out that things will just start deteriorating and things won't work out well. So the whole essence is to say every agency of the criminal justice system has a role to play. And that role must be played with all sincerity of purpose if things will work out. Then the issue around arrest, incessant arrest and detention for every form and manner of offense, that is where that is actually the beginning of the problem and speaks to the issue of inflow. It is not every offender that is a risk to the society. And generally speaking, if you take the United Nations Convention, United Nations Standard Minimum Rules on non-custodial measures, one of the things Article 8 talks about is the fact that the only reason, first of all, the convention, the Standard Minimum Rules says that detention should be a measure of last resort, especially pre-trial detention. Now, detention generally should be for the purpose of safety and security of our society. Now, when somebody that has committed one or alleged to have committed an offense, one offense or the other, is seen not to be a risk to the society, there is no reason whatsoever why that person should be put in custody. But one clear thing that has come to our knowledge, which I think looking forward Nigeria should be considering, is the fact that we utilize the justice sector, especially the criminal justice sector, to address every challenge. We use it to address our social and economic challenge. And that is a huge error. And this is showing with what is happening in the correctional centers. look at, if you check the statistics that was given by the correctional center, it talks about 82 correctional centers across the federation that are congested. It's not like every correctional center is congested, but check the details of those correctional centers. They are in the urban areas.
Okay.
Yes, they are in the urban areas. And some of them, when you take the overall statistics, it's talking about 69% of awaiting trial persons. But there are actually custodial centers that have over 80 persons awaiting trial. And the unfortunate thing is that we have laws in place already to deal with these issues. And the questions we will be asking ourselves is, why are the laws not working? The correctional service, as we speak today, has two major services: custodial service and non-custodial service. So expectation is that some people should be diverted to the non-custodial service. And we are asking, why is it not happening as much as it should? And that is where many other factors come in. Factors around making laws and not providing making budgetary provision for their implementation. And again, having this, in terms of attitude of implementers of the law, you have a law in place that is progressive, that is targeted at solving the problem of the nation. And you are still maybe having some attitudes towards utilizing that law. So the conference targeted at getting stakeholders to be forward-looking,
okay,
to be creative, and to align themselves with the recent, progress that has been made within the Nigerian criminal justice system.
All right, Ms. Ogo.
In terms of new laws.
Ms. Ogo, just to ask to throw more light on one of the things you've mentioned, and reading the reports or the communique post the conference, you highlighted some key recommendations, some proposals, some strongly recommended, one of which, a number of them very key, but one of which you talked about the challenge we have with database. Having a database of people, whether awaiting trial, in correctional centers, and that we should have, what's the situation on ground? And because like you mentioned, we have a new administration, it's an opportunity for you to clearly define some of the quick wins for this administration. We have a database challenge. Then you also talk about the pro bono arrangement, that we don't have enough of that. What one would assume is that Nigeria is quite a benevolent nation, if I put it that way. And so we see lawyers who go into correctional services to offer their services free of charge. But in your findings, you note that we don't have enough to meet the needs that we currently have. How can we shore that up? What can be done to improve that?
Okay, thank you so much. Regarding the very first question you asked, the issue around database of persons in detention has always been there on the front burner. In fact, in the last two periodic reviews of Nigeria, it has always come up, as a recommendation to Nigeria to have, number one, unfettered access to places of detention, and at the same time, have registers of persons in detention. This addresses so many challenges. Many people are of the view that, given the population of Nigeria, that the number of persons that are in detention is quite small, considering, the level of criminal activities and the population of the country. But the point is that each time you see data, most of the data we have in place are from the correctional service, and not from the over 18 other, detention centers we have across the country. So what we are saying is that, as arresting agencies, it is important for compliance with what the law says. You cannot detain somebody without keeping records of that person. And that is what causes disappearances and the rest of them. It equally causes, makes it difficult to checkmate issues of torture and the rest of them. So this is quite critical, and this is a time to rise up. I know that the the president of the Federal Republic of Nigeria, as we speak, has engaged with security institutions. But this should be a matter that should be on the table, because it is out there that we are challenged around there. Now, regarding the case of pro bono, Prawa has in the past taken up issue of pro bono services and have for several years worked, in partnership with Legal Aid Council of Nigeria to enhance their capacity to provide legal services to indigent Nigerians. But the point is that the Legal Aid Council of Nigeria is willing to do this work, but they are incapacitated in terms of human and material resources. For the whole federation, as at the last time I took record of that, the population of lawyers with the Legal Aid Council of Nigeria is not over 250. And you can imagine the population of Nigerians that require the services of these pro bono lawyers, knowing fully well that in this country, especially criminal laws are skewed against the poor in the society, those that cannot afford legal representation. So Prawa in the past had done something around that by bringing together, midwifing a relationship, an MOU between the Legal Aid Council of Nigeria and the Nigerian Bar Association, because Nigerian Bar Association has lawyers all over the federation. In every community, you must find a lawyer so that they can work together to provide these services to the people. But, we are yet to see this coming up, the way it should. But we are not relenting. We are still engaging with MBA. We are still on our part, our, projects. Each and every project that we have pro bono and paralegal services as part of it. And we keep engaging lawyers from Nigerian Bar Association. Okay. So what we are now saying is that with the new administration, there should be standing relationship with MBA so that it will be clear that, this is where we are headed and we must do this to help the country.
Okay, you've said a lot, very good stuff. But one thing I'd like to talk about is, even apart from, congestion, the welfare of the inmates. It's called a correctional center, but it looks as though our prisons have become a punitive center. Things like even the food they eat, humongous amounts of money spent on that, but it is still very, very powerless, I should say, the state of welfare for our prisoners. I've been part of many prison outreaches, and I know what they go through. Can we, shine this light of advocacy on that issue?
Yes, please. I think this is one of the major issues that was raised by the Honorable Minister during the conference. You can imagine humongous sum of 224 billion expended on feeding. And look at the testimony you are giving, the experience you have around the food of these people. Now, you are equally considering the fact that almost 70% of these people that are fed are persons that have not yet been tried, which means they are presumed innocent until a court of competent jurisdiction declared them guilty. Which means we are not getting it right at all. Because the rehabilitative needs, the whole essence of corrections, of the criminal justice system is for safety, for security. And if we are expending this huge amount of money and we still have the correctional centers overpopulated, it means that the major objectives of corrections are lost. The objectives especially the objectives around rehabilitation, reformation, and reintegration. You cannot properly rehabilitate anybody, reform anybody in the circumstance under which they stay in custody. Because the population will be overwhelming to the officers within the correctional centers, and they may not even be able to put forward the requisite reform programs for these people, because they will be managing the center to ensure that there is peace and there is no jailbreak. And now, what is the value of expending that amount of money when we know we can divert these people and we have laws that have provided for that? We can divert them, let them do community service. Some of them should be on probation. Those that are deserving should go on parole. And by so doing, you are reducing the population. You can imagine what will happen if we take just 5% of the money that is used to give this feeding, which you have assessed and said is not good, and we now channel this amount of money to rehabilitation, giving them skills, giving them education, and managing them even when they are out in terms of shelter, in terms of starting off one business or the other. And that was why the minister initiated what we call fines for inmates project and program. And this is calling on Nigerians, because as we speak, in as much as we believe the government should do this or that, as the government of the nation, we as individuals, we as these people, we are the beneficiaries of a secure society. And we should contribute our quota in different ways, like contributing to payment of fines. You can imagine that some people are in custody for over 3 months for a fine. I saw that at Suleja Correctional Center about 3 years ago. 2,000 naira. Somebody spent 3 months eating food, drinking water inside correctional center. And for somebody to be given option of fine, it simply means that this person is not a high-risk offender. So why would we not scrap this thing about going into custody for everybody? And we are now calling on Nigerians. That's the call the minister has made and has taken steps to ensure that it happens. They call for Nigerians to start contributing to this and having a sense, a feel of what our criminal justice system is all about. And it is only when we do this that we start appreciating the entire work around corrections. We start appreciating the fact that somebody that has committed an offense still has a second chance, because our attitude, our behavior to ex-inmates equally criminalize them further. It equally causes what we call recidivism. When somebody comes out from custody, the next thing you see is that we start isolating the person. We start stigmatizing the person. Your tailor that was once in custody, maybe for 2 weeks, he may have been innocent, but just because you heard that he has gone to custody, the next thing, he cannot sew clothes for you again, because he may steal your clothes. He may do this or do that. We are causing this. And the next thing that will happen is that this person will go back to custody where he is accepted, where the constituency that believe in him and accepts him. So what I am saying in effect is that, as I mentioned earlier, can we start addressing our challenges as they are? If we have issues of shelter, let us address it. If we are talking about mass housing, let it accrue to persons that are deserving of it. Because in this country today, not having shelter could be a reason for somebody to be in custody. Can we start looking at our education, looking at access to education, access to at least the minimum standards of living for Nigerians? Because this is the foundation. When you go to our correctional centers, it's like, in some cases, boys' secondary school. Can we have all these people wasted? Should we not try our possible best to ensure that we apply our funds the way it will be beneficial to the country? Now, a new government is in place and is aligning with the same period with the enlistment of correctional service in the concurrent legislative list. It means a lot. People are criticizing, people are supporting, but there is one basic thing. Those that are criticizing are saying it could be an opportunity for governors to do this, because they are coming from the knowledge that some of our leaders at the state level are seeing state funds as their estate of their ancestors, which they used as the way they like. But when you look at it the other way, most of the citizens that are in custody, a huge percentage of them are from that particular state. And why are they in custody? They are also in custody mostly because of laws made in those states. A state where beggars are begging is a crime. Hawking agidi on the street is a crime. Every damn thing is a crime. Up to being a vagabond. You see laws, in place that are overly broad, they're ambiguous, they're vague, and any arresting agency can capitalize on them and term anything offense. There is no how anybody that is picked you cannot find something in the law. At worst, you say action capable of causing public breach of trust. So you see people and the practice of holding charge. Anybody that is brought is put in custody. Okay. That's the first reaction. Okay. Nobody is asking, what is the circumstance around this? Okay. What are the extenuating circumstances? What is the age of this person? Okay. Will we end up? I saw a report in the past, the report came up about 20 years ago, talking about the age of persons, a bracket of persons in custody, between 35 and 50-something. But go and check the most recent report that Prawa had, Prison Survey of 2017. It's talking about 18 and 35. Are we going to waste our youth in custody without doing the needful?
Okay, Ms. Ogu, I see the connection you try to draw between the sociology of crime and the plight of our correctional centers. But do you ever think that if the Nigerian government provides housing, provides education, provides jobs, that a time will ever come, given the complexity of our society, when our prisons will be like the prisons in Netherlands? For more than a decade now in the Netherlands, they can't find people to put in prison. The prisons are empty. And then the second point, more than a decade ago, the Ministry of Interior in Nigeria recommended the privatization of the correctional centers, a public-private partnership. And in parts of Europe, you have that kind of arrangement. Do you think if we go that way, that will help?
Okay, taking the socio-economic, views regarding imprisonment. When you talk about education, when I mentioned shelter, I looked at shelter from two perspectives. Shelter as a reason for arrest, and that is lack of shelter as reason for arrest, and lack of shelter as reason for non-effective implementation of non-custodial measures. If everybody in Nigeria, as we speak, has an address where you can locate the person, you have taken like 30% steps to solving some of our problems. The non-custodial measures that we have put in place, often when somebody is picked that should have been channeled towards community service or any other sort of sanction that can happen within the community, you find out that you may not have an address for that person. How to follow up on the person. The person don't, even here in the FCT, where you have all the mansions, you still have people living in cartons, people living in canopies, so that you can't even locate them. You don't even know how to start approaching the issue of corrections from that perspective of the community. So it is a challenge. Now, shelter. Who do you call a vagrant? Most people have been arrested for sleeping under the bridge. So it is a factor. We are not saying that it will 100% drive away crime and criminality, because crime has been with us from time immemorial. But the point is that there will be serious reduction. You see that seriousness when you hear people say boys oye in Nigeria. Have you seen anybody working in NNPC join them? Has anybody joined them from Central Bank? It's the people that wake up in the morning, they don't have food on their table, and every activity they do in public space to put food on their table has been criminalized. This is the big issue. We should start addressing that. It is better to expend our money on people and grow them economically and socially than spend money feeding them in custody. That is the message. Now, when you come to, is it Netherlands or, it is possible, but it is not something that is achievable in one day. It's gradual process. Are we as a people willing to accept all the measures, both legal and in terms of legislation and policies? Are we as Nigerians able to accept this? There is on ground now parole. Parole board has been inaugurated, and they've started their work. When they start coming back to us as communities, are we willing to accept them? Or are we willing to go about mounting the whole thing, destroying and the entire process? These are the things. And if you look at the Nigerian Correctional Service Act, Section 44 provides for funding for non-custodial measures. And part of it has invited Nigerians, just as the minister has invited all of us, to do the needful, to contribute to correcting these people, because it will pay us collectively as a people. And the contribution can be 500 naira. There is ground for you to make contribution of any amount, and you equally can, on your own, step into any correctional center and ask for the release of at least the least, person with the least option of fine. Any amount you can afford. And not only doing that, being able to follow up. And that is just what Prawa is advocating. That is what the initiative introduced by the minister is talking about. Let us release these inmates with fine. The balance of the money would have expended on them while they eat the food that we have acknowledged is not befitting, should be utilized in correcting them, in rehabilitating them, and making them useful to us as a society. Now, having private everything, there are so many initiatives that are good. The important thing is, how are they being implemented? Because we know that there are several. So whether it is private, whether it is government owned, no matter the type of correctional system we are applying, there must be accountability. There must be intentional, efforts at ensuring that it's functioning the way it should. That is the only way it can work. But as we speak today, what we still have is the Nigerian Correctional Service providing both custodial and non-custodial service. Can we provide the correctional service with the requisite human and material resources to deliver on their objectives? We can start there and start the discussion around what can be done. And as we are having the new government, given the concurrent legislative listing, this is an opportunity for states to start setting the priorities right and start considering, because in the past, states sit by, make laws, and the laws will now put people in custody, and the federal government will be the one bringing the money for the feeding of these persons in custody. Maybe they should start rethinking as they are coming, what and what should go into their laws, especially their environmental, traffic laws, and the rest of them, so that it's not everybody that must go into custody. And we have enough energy, enough time to correct the ones that need be in custody and be corrected.
Very much for highlighting and giving these recommendations. Of all the things you said, you cannot discount the fact that you need money to implement a number of your recommendations. And if you're going to ask for, more revenue to the correctional service justice system in Nigeria, you would then look back at what was done with what had been allocated or set to be allocated in the past. And that perhaps the reason why there's not a political will, if I put it that way, for addressing the issue of people awaiting trial is the amount of money that is set to be budgeted to feed, to look after them. In 2023, there was an uproar when 22.4 billion naira was budgeted to feeding inmates. There was an uproar when the Minister of Interior, through his spokesperson, had said that they had 8,300 per inmate. That's how much it took to look at an inmate in custody. Those awaiting trial and those already sentenced. So there's corruption in the management of funds, and it seems as if there's some people benefiting from the number of people who remain in custody, because as at from their statistics, they said 75% of those in detention are awaiting trial. How do we deal with the issue of corruption to justify the asking of revenue to be allocated to standardizing the correctional service in Nigeria?
Okay, thank you. You know, when you talk about corruption, I think the easiest way of addressing, because corruption, the way we have used corruption in Nigeria, everywhere, corruption is in the home, is in the school, is on the road, everywhere there is corruption. But I think my thoughts is that the easiest way to start addressing this issue of corruption as regards corrections in Nigeria is to start implementing our laws. First of all, the correctional service has responsibility for custodial and non-custodial. Now, in terms of budgeting, as we speak today, not even 1 naira has been provided for the non-custodial. And now, if there is funding for non-custodial, it means that more work will be done in that area, more diversion of persons to non-custodial. And when there is that diversion, nobody will come up with 224 billion again as feeding for inmates, because a huge number of those persons that are currently in custody will be out in the community, providing one service or the other as their sanctions. Now, when you want to equally look at corruption within the correctional service, don't look at it strictly as correctional service. Look at the enablers, all the other agencies of the criminal justice system. The correctional service sits in their comfort zone and people are brought in. The frustrating thing about this, let me tell you, Power has engaged in many prison decongestion projects. Do you know the frustration? On a day you sweat with lawyers, paralegals to release 50 people and you are happy, you are jumping up and down. That same day, from the same correctional center, 70 people will enter. Now, who is bringing these people in? And that is the issue of inflow. Do you know that some states, the way the laws are made, may be criminalizing people as a way of raising IGR of their states? Everything is about fine. Other things that they can address other ways is about fines. And when these people go in, it becomes a big issue. So if you want to address this holistically, you must look at the inflow. And that is what Section 12, Sub 4 to 12 of the Nigerian Correctional Service, Act talks about. And that is what can be done in terms of a time where the correctional center exceeds its capacity. A correctional center being congested is not just an issue of data. It's a human rights issue. It leads to torture. You look at a space for 10 people being occupied by 50, you know the implication in terms of sanitation, in terms of ventilation, and the rest of them, lighting. It has a lot to do with the mental health of these people in custody. Now, Section 12, Sub 4 to 12, is talking about what the correctional service can do when a correctional custodial center is about to exceed its capacity. And there are different mechanisms, different agencies of the criminal justice system that the law says should be alerted. Early warning signal, a week just give this signal to the Attorney General of the Federation, depending on where, Attorney General of the state, the Inspector General of Police, and every other mechanism that can help to bring this down. And there is a 3-month window for these people to act, to reverse this. And many people were saying, this provision, does it mean? Because if nothing is done within the 3 months and the center exceeds its capacity, the expectation is that they should stop receiving. People are saying, do you mean we should leave criminals to be roaming around our streets and the rest of them? But that is not the intendment of the law. What the law is trying to say is prioritize. As arresting agency, you arrested 3 armed robbers. You arrested 50 beggars on the street, 20 hawkers. Who do you want to put inside? Which one should you keep in the community and which one should you put inside custody? And once this is implemented, you find out that there will be drastic reduction of number of persons that go into custody, because the custody itself is a university on its own, university of crime for some people. They have opportunity. There is no proper, because there is no space because of congestion. So proper classification does not happen. So you can see a mixture of hardened criminals and very minor offenders. A young man, you may have seen the video, in 2020, went viral during the COVID. What happened? He started his pathway into crime by pilfering, stealing a phone, theft, and he was given 3 months. He went into custody. By the time he came out, he graduated. And what happened? By the next time he was picked by the agencies, arresting agencies, the journalists interviewed him. And do you know that this young man was alleged to have raped 35 women in the course of armed robbery? He started with stealing a phone he may have stolen, may have sold for 3,000 naira for maybe a plate of spaghetti or indomie. And he ended up in a custody. He came out, they armed him, told him he was a fool to have stolen only phone. And he came out and did that. Who are the victims? Young women, old women, whoever in the society. Would we have averted this? Yes. We would have averted this if we channeled him to where he should belong. Okay. As a first offender, as a minor, not minor in that sense. Stealing is not good, but he had opportunity of being corrected. Okay. And you know the worst? By the time he was asked, what would you want Nigeria to do for you? He simply said, waste me. How many of our youths are we willing to waste? Okay.
Okay. Thank you so much. Thank you so much. And that's a great way to anchor it. Thank you so much for your time and your insights. It's been extensive this morning.